Hello, welcome to another episode of the Data Science Leaders Podcast. I am your host, Dave Cole, and today's guest is Michal Levitzky. Michal, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. So Michal is the head of data and analytics at the Migdal Group. She has over 20 years of experience in the world of finance and insurance, the last 7 years being in insurance. Today, with Michal, we are going to talk. We have three topics. The first topic is that Michal did not start in the world of data science, but does that matter, right? Does that matter? She is a data science leader today. The second topic is talking about data science change management. Michal has worked in very large companies, have been around for many years, and has been a bit of a change agent, sort of introducing data and analytics into these teams in a meaningful way. And then last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about BI and data science. I think there's a good conversation to be had. I mean, should the BI team and the data science team be under one roof? Should they be separate teams? How do they collaborate? How do they work together? So let's go ahead and start at the top here. So let's talk about your background. Michal, you started as an accountant, and you got your CPA, and then
nobody's
you
perfect.
somehow right, and you went from there to becoming a quant. So can we talk about how that happened?
Sure. Yeah, so I got my CPA. In Israel, you need to go through 2 years of internship to get your CPA certificate. Then I worked in the finance group of a large VC fund in Israel. Very complex group, and reporting to a Singaporean company. I found myself like on a quarterly process of creating reports, financial reports. And then at 2006, we moved to the US. I got my MBA. My goal was to never again look at financial statements. And I actually
Why is that?
met that. I met
Why
that goal.
did you not want to look at
Still,
financial statements?
meeting that goal. And so I got my MBA with finance focus. And I knew I wanted to do something in the capital market, but I didn't know exactly what. And then I got introduced or got to interview with Wellington Management, one of the largest global asset management worldwide. There was a small group that was just forming. It was around the 2006 period, the asset allocation team. And like I said, I didn't want to look at the financial statements. So in a typical analyst, I wasn't looking for a typical analyst role. Asset allocation team looks at the top-down on indices and governments and more economic kind of in the different asset classes and create models. And that's where I was introduced to the quant world I had a great manager and went through very robust statistics processes, got my CFA, which is very heavy in statistics. And that's how I made that unique jump from it's less unique today. I hear a lot of accountants that are looking into moving towards the data and the data science world today.
Really? So how do you go from looking at financial statements, having that accounting background, and then learning the stats to be able to get your CFA? Like did you take classes? Did you learn on your own? Did you learn on the job? Like, how did that happen?
So I think the MBA is the one, the one program that helped me went through that. I actually, when I finished my CPA exams, I said, never again am I going to take such huge exams, like more than 2-3 weeks of studies. And here I am, wanted to go into the capital market in the US, and slowly but surely I realized that without the CFA, which is three huge exams in over 3 years, where you go through very sometimes very deep, sometimes very broad topics on financial markets, many of which are statistics. So that kind of got me into the theory, but then you need someone to go with you hand by hand to do the lift up of what you actually studied, and how do you implement it in an actual world, actual model building, looking at QA of a model, building time series models, and so forth. So getting out of the class with a very and that's why a lot of, I think, the young data scientists meet today, how do they go out from very ordinary, very clean data set that they study on in class, in different Python classes, and you get into the world and the data is messy, the data is missing, it's
Right.
not normalized, and so forth.
Right. So, yes, the real world for a data scientist is not like what you learn in class, for sure. Dealing with 30 data sets. So, you got an opportunity at Wellington. It sounds like you had a strong mentor, a boss who helped you, sort of make that transition from your traditional financial background. The CFA was sort of a forcing function for you to learn statistics as well. And then you started down that path, right, of really, becoming a data science leader. And then I guess you made also maybe a subtle transition from being a quant, right, to then moving more firmly in the world of data and analytics. Like what made you realize that this path was for you, that you really wanted to stay on the data science side?
Yeah. So after couple of years of building models and refining models and looking at different asset classes, I also did some risk management on the capital market within the asset allocation team, which is more technical kind of type of work. To the point that after 8 years, I was ready or brave to admit to myself that more than I'm in love with the capital market, I was really in love with the data itself. And then I asked myself, okay, so what do I do with that? And at that point, I wanted to do something which is more pure data analytics, not just looking at, not just building the models and refining them, and so not only the pure data science work. It back then, 2013, 14, data science is like, it used to be statistics and then data mining and then data science. So and then I joined, I think, a combination of the quant work, the statistic, my CPA, my CFA came all together when I joined John Hancock, which is the US arm of Manulife, which is a global financial services company, mainly in insurance, to build from scratch basically a data analytic function for one of their risk group. So there wasn't, up to that point, their project, their risk and audit project did not get to the point that they really utilized looking at data and screening the data and getting information really in a robust way from data, wherever there was a business process built upon data, right? And the challenge was that, again, this was 2014. It was just, I find myself, this is like, it goes throughout my career. Then I found myself just forming, the industry just realized that maybe data analytics teams are required in these risk and audit groups as well. So how does it look like? How do we form it? What is the strategy? What is the roadmap? How do we change processes? How do we work with the internal team of the group, with the external clients or internal clients within the company? How do we get the data? What infrastructure do we use? Do we do we get the data on our infrastructure or work on the client application, which but then nobody knew how to connect everything. So that was really kind of building a small new company within that small group, which not that small. At the time it was like about 200, so we supported about 250 people globally. It was a global team, so part of the conversation or the considerations were how do we build the that team? How do we support the different groups in Boston, in Canada, in 11 countries in Asia, and we build in each location. We hired people to support the local team, but then how do you create like a team environment that we can speak the language, we support each other, we learn from each other, we use each other, learning curves within the team. So a lot of strategy and a lot of change management, because it really it can throw people off. Well, we really introduced something totally new to the group and totally new to Manulife, to the point that sometimes I was working even with the Azure team to set up a cloud infrastructure for a group, and he's like, this is really the first time that I do it, and I'm like, it hit me time and time again. At the time, Manulife was going through that whole data analytic transformation, and I was part of the leadership group of the whole organization. So for me, it was a huge benefit. I felt like I got the front seat in that huge flight of getting an enterprise like Manulife shifting towards data analytics. So it was fascinating.
I want to talk about that next. So to cap off, your background. I mean, it's a fascinating story on how you sort of went from the world of accounting all the way to the world of data science, and now you're firmly in the world of data science. And I think you're not alone. There's many other data scientists and data science leaders who have followed a similar path. And I assume that if I were to look at your team, it's not just going to all be people who started as statisticians. You had a strong mentor. Am I correct in assuming that you also hire people with varied backgrounds and who potentially are trying to make a change and who have maybe a strong stats background but haven't been maybe are just getting introduced to working in the world of data and becoming more of a data scientist? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yes. And I think that's the beauty of that. So in John Hancock, the group team members were people who came from IT, people who came from computer science, people who came from Deloitte as a consultant who worked on data groups, which was great. An actuary that built his career in data science. And actually, when I left, we were really formalizing or talking about kind of a rotation program within Manulife that either actuarial people or even data analytics, advanced analytics folks will do kind of a rotation within the group, because a lot of knowledge is captured within this group that work across different units, and you're not just focusing on one specific unit. So that's what I like in groups like that you look at different units within the cross-function, cross-border, and you really need to understand every time you need to adjust to the new project, the new team, the new data set, the new processes, and you accumulate a lot of knowledge like that. So I think that was the main kind of diverse team that I managed, who came from different career paths, different countries, also very international. That was great.
That's awesome. So we also have been talking about the next topic already, which is change management, within the world of data science. So you talked about your experience at John Hancock. My understanding is that at the Migdal Group, it's somewhat similar, where you are a sort of spearheading, introducing the world of data and analytics to a company that, maybe traditionally hasn't relied on models to make their decisions, or relied on data to make their decisions. What sort of advice would you have to a data science leader who's facing that same predicament, in that same situation, where he or she is trying to build out a team, and actually get the buy-in from the business to be able to actually affect change and change the way in which decisions are made?
Yeah, I'm smiling because there's so many challenges to a CDO getting into the role. And change management, I used to say that there is that triangle that people use, or even I used to present, the combination of the people, maybe the tools, the skills, to build kind of a function. And I always said that there is something missing within that triangle, which is it's a change management process. Right. So first of all, it's hard. It's hard, and it's different. It's really different from place to place. I think the first, perhaps the one advice that I can say about all of the places is to first to acknowledge that this is about this is a change management process. There are places that you can get some, there are groups that can help you with that, but to acknowledge that you're coming in to disturb, whatever people used to do up till that point, and do it differently, share information differently, look at things differently, use data differently. So in one place, they never had it before, and now you need to kind of help them understand how to use it. In another place, what do you mean? We're an insurance company, of course we use data. But wait a minute, maybe you're not using it the right way, the clean way, the efficient way. Maybe you can do more of that. Maybe it can help you. So there is a really wide range of changing people's mindset and approach to what you're trying to do. So
it's hard. Is the headline?
Why it's hard?
Yeah.
And the second, acknowledge it to yourself and to the top management and the company, that it's not only about resources and hiring and the tools and everything. It's going to be, and people don't like change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one technique that I've seen companies use is to sort of do this under the banner of digital transformation, right? Which I've always sort of thought, like, well, what on earth does that mean? But I think it's just kind of it's a way for everyone to acknowledge that we are transforming. We are going to change the way in which we operate, and we're going to use data, we're going to use technology, to fundamentally change how we make decisions. And I think it can be helpful, right, to plant the seed and have that backdrop of like, hey, we're doing something really hard, and we're gonna and all of you are gonna, your jobs are gonna change potentially. Your day-to-day jobs are gonna change potentially. Even though there are gonna be new roles, your roles might change. Did you do something similar? It sounds like that. How did you get, sort of management to acknowledge that there's this big change underway?
So first of all, you pointed out, you mentioned a point that I usually people make that connection between the data and the digital. I think the digital change is perhaps an easier one because people see the results where where you understand you need to clean the data and organize and bring some data governance and map the data and speak the same language of the data. These are projects or these are changes that are less kind of have less direct effect or direct outcome. Oh yeah, suddenly we have new processes that we can go on the digital. We have a new application. These are sometimes they are easier to present the end result, whereas in data, when you come and do the data governance and in a project, suddenly you need to distill exactly who is that client or how do you define the client, and you don't just rely anymore on a single person who defined it 5 years ago, and you spend
Right.
4 weeks to do like a research between actuary and IT and other data analysts and the business and people, and then you realize maybe they forgot on the way some data, and then you need to you have difficult conversation because you might be presenting data which contradict whatever was presented
Right.
up till that point, and you need to defend it. So that's why I find the change is suddenly more kind of in people's face. What do you mean? That's what we've been doing forever.
Right.
So I
So I'm
think I
hearing you
lost.
say this, it sort
I
of
lost you
starts
on the
with
question.
the data. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say you sort of start with the data in the sort of change management, like getting people to acknowledge that maybe historically teams are using different data sets and there needs to be some form of standardization, and the result of that can be maybe people fundamentally not having like misunderstood maybe historically how well or poorly teams are doing because the data is was maybe not organized in the correct way. I don't know, there was duplicate customers or or what have you. So you can kind of start with the data and cleaning that up, and then you can start hopefully over time building trust, right? You get everyone on the same page, understanding the data in the same way. Then you can start to build on the analytics and then the building out models.
So
Does that sound about
one
right?
way. I've been in
One way.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's one way where suddenly the business is, when you can really show the robustness of the process that took much longer than the business thought it should take because they're used to something else, then you start building the trust with them. Another, experience I had is when we work in an internal group and working on internal clients' data, and there is a resistance. At some point, the head of the group, not the data analytics, the head of the risk group can say, "Listen, that's the way we're going to do it now. You either like it or not, but that's the right way to do, and we do expect you to align your practices with our new requirements, and you need really strong people and strong management support for that." So that's another way I've seen it happen. So it, like I
Have to
say,
get
it
the
comes
management
in many
support, management
in many
buy-in.
ways. And maybe the third advice that I'll give people on change management: don't jump into, okay, now we're gonna shuffle everything, and take like 3-4 months to learn, to study the dynamics, the people, the resistance. Many times I find I define it. Things are management are really happy with the whole data analytics and changes and analysis and models, but then it gets stuck somewhere at the level of maybe directors or below. The person that needs start working, start doing something different than what they have been doing up till now. That's where your big challenge sometimes. Again,
That's a really
another
interesting.
experience that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation that sometimes management can be more accepting of the change and is sort of ready for the change, probably because they've been involved in the decision process. Like they know why you're there, Michal. They realize that you're there to affect change and they're looking forward to it. But then the people who actually have to change, their jobs are fundamentally changing. The data that they're working with changes. Maybe there's a new skill they have to learn. That's where that there can be some friction, and that. So I think
Yeah, and sometimes they really know the data. Management
yeah.
can be, happy about it, and it's maybe much more complicated than what they actually realize, and that's another gap that that's been created with that.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
imagine that
fascinating.
yeah. So I imagine when you're going through this process, like getting a buy-in at all levels, obviously is very important. And like, I think the takeaway for me is like don't forget the people who are actually going to be the ones whose jobs are fundamentally potentially changing. Really work with them to get them bought in on the process, and finding a champion there
And
can be really
it doesn't
helpful.
have to be huge change. Yeah,
Sure.
I don't even talk about. I don't even think about people who lose their job or anything. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of we've been sending that report that way forever. For me to start sending it or doing the change in a different way, or to I don't know, to change the methodology or even touch the reports on legacy system or whatever. The one sentence that I keep hearing, and it's amazing when you talk with other CDO, it's like everybody here, it's like, what do you mean? That's how we do it. And we
Yeah.
say, okay, well, maybe we need to start doing it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way we've always done it. Is usually not an acceptable reason for continuing the way you do
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
maybe because of that we need to change it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's switch gears a little bit here and dive into our last topic. So, you know, the world of business intelligence, sometimes called analytics, and then the world of data science. I think there's schools of thought where both of those teams potentially fall under one umbrella, one leader. In other cases, I've seen them be completely separate teams. First of all, what is your opinion on how these teams should be organized, and then maybe how they should work together?
Yeah, so it's a great point. So just I think it's important to define when we say BI what exactly we mean. And
Absolutely.
as you know, I'm on the business side, so when I talk about BI, I'm talking about more on the descriptive analysis and maybe sometimes build in the dashboard to visualize it or to share with the client and to make it interactive. I think the engineering side could kind of more naturally be on the IT. I've seen places that it makes sense to help to have them within the business, or at least, I haven't got to that point, to be honest, at least have a data engineering support on the data science side. Because at the end of the day, both analysts and the data scientists use a lot of their time to do exactly that, the data engineering. So
Yep.
you would have liked to have like an expert on that. It creates some clashes with IT sometimes because it's a kind of a pure IT function that sits within a business function. But
Yeah.
we'll leave that for another discussion. So with that, I've been in a place that I've seen groups that said, you know what, we only do data science. We just do the model, the big things. We bring, the AI, the next phase of the business, the insurance, and we don't do BI. And I thought, there is a miss there, because both sides are working, dealing in many times with understanding the data. Where is the data? Cleaning the data. What is the data? Data dictionary, data governance,
Understand the data
right?
model,
And
data
creating
cleanliness,
some data sets and
governance,
panels, and right.
Yep.
And then, so for me, it makes more sense to have them sit together and collaborate 100%. So today at Migdal, I have those two building blocks under under me. So one side is data science, the other side is the business analytics and BI. And there is a BI group on the IT side that does more of the data management. They build management dashboards. So wherever you need like a management broad dashboard that runs every day, that management and CEO opens on the morning, and kind of reporting on next or on last day information, I think it really belongs there, because the data, the process need to be robust and organized and right and built with the right UX and UI and so forth. Where it comes to more analysis and analytics, looking at the data, so throughout that line of, from descriptive to up to the point of even predictive, I definitely see the benefit of having that group within a centralized center of excellence, working with the data scientists. So in our case, for example, data scientists who worked on a broad panel for segmentation project, a client segmentation project. The next day, one of the analysts will have a project on clients and will be able to, speak to the next guy in the next table, where to take the data, what does it mean, how they created the data, and so forth, and vice versa, right? One analyst, she created a data set for another project that when data scientists started working on churn model, they have a discussion with them, and there is like it's a mutual kind of conversation, and the value is much bigger. You create higher value when you have that conversation within under one umbrella, as opposed to another group, and that group is just doing models, and when they need to get the data, now they need to start figuring out on doing similar things to where other group might be doing. All of that is also depends on the architecture of the data architecture, of course. But in my mind, I think that the business analytics and the BI has more pros than cons to sit together with the data.
I totally agree. I think you make a number of good points around how understand the common thread between the two teams is like a really deep understanding of the underlying data, and how the BI teams can potentially be creating customer segments and actual data sets that the data science team can leverage. And I think it also goes the other way. I mean, I can imagine a dashboard that shows historical trends, but also then predicts forecasts forward in the next 2 quarters or what have you. And that leverages a model that the data science team has put together to forecasting model. So I think I think there are some synergies there, and I also think one thing that I've seen, I don't know if you agree with this, Michal, but I've seen that some data science teams, and I don't mean this to be negative here, but you can struggle when it comes to actually telling stories about the data. So if you're actually if you're building a model and you're trying to explain which features may be the most impactful to the dependent variable within the model, like explaining how the business can potentially learn something from the model itself. And they might not be the best at doing that, at telling that story and translating that into something that the business can understand. And I think potentially your analytics or your BI team can be helpful there in that sort of storytelling. I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but I certainly have.
Yes, absolutely. So not only telling the story, but also the discussion with the business and with the different system, implementation in the systems, right? So it really depends on the group. I was fortunate to bring on the group someone who's been in the company for many years. Before she moved to manage the analytics and BI team, she came from the marketing side, so she really helped to facilitate all the business discussion. But in terms of telling a story from the models, it really depends who the audience is, because sometimes I find in Migdal, for example, there are senior VPs who will love to go, and maybe this is insurance people who will love to go into the details and understand the many nuances of how they created, and sometimes we'll even have a good conversation and add a lot of value to how they define the model or the population, but it's hard. That's why I think you need someone to manage those functions to help gap that. So when that data scientist or even head of data scientist present to the CEO or other people of the management, you can go into that details level of details. They're just not. Their mind is not. That's not what matters to them. And I usually I joke with my head of data science that leave the polygraph aside. You won't be tested for telling the truth or not if you didn't add that apostrophe about disclaimer that you use that which models of,
you don't need to go into such detail that you feel like you're sort of lying by omission. Like you're not, just because you left something out for brevity's sake, like that's okay. You don't need to have a super detailed slide with all your assumptions and all the caveats and everything else. I think that's definitely good advice.
But it goes the other way. And then it goes the other way as well. So explaining the business, having the business understand models with all the hype around it, it's it's not an easy task at all. So first of all, it's not magic. Prediction has errors. So why should I use a model that might be, sometimes I'll get errors to start with. And then, for example, explaining, many people are used, financial people at least, simple regression models. They understand, they know it very well. But then when you move to explaining a decision tree, for example, so having a conversation about, it's not a set of parameters with the coefficients that you can see who is the bigger contributor to the model or not. And sometimes you can have that conversation with someone who is a little bit more, not technical, but went through some statistics, right, and can understand it. And sometimes it's way over people's head to try to understand. So that's another thing for data scientists, to be able to explain models on what models do in a business manner. So I usually tell my folks, okay, now tell me that in business words. I don't want to hear any statistics word in your explanation. Try to say a sentence without the statistics.
Yep.
And it's hard. It's really hard for them. Yeah. So you can find you see it in many, like you said, in many data scientists.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot in the DSL podcast. That I think the role of a data science leader at times can be just to be that translator, be someone who can explain the models in a way that the business understands and gets on board with. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm with you. I think having the analytics team and the data science team all under one umbrella makes a ton of sense to me. So we went into a lot of great topics today. Hearing a lot about your background, hearing about how you've affected change in a number of companies and sort of introducing data science, and ideas on how to do that the right way. I think also explaining that it's just hard to do, and then also talking a bit about BI and analytics and where it should sit in an organization and how it should. How that team can potentially be additive to your data science team and help them out, and vice versa. Well, Michal, I really enjoyed the conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, can they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love that.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. Have a great rest of your week.